So I know that one of the things that people really wanted to talk about was where do you start with a student who really comes to you with very few learning skills? Sometimes those students are nonverbal, sometimes they're not. Sometimes there's students who just don't know how to follow directions. They might be preschoolers, but I've also had high schoolers that this has been the case for. They come to school and it's clear that somewhere along the way they missed those basic skills like following directions and being with the class and all those kinds of things. So I wanted to take some time today to talk about the steps I think about when I work with those types of students. Now, let me preface this by saying I am not going to I'm not going to be able to solve every problem that you have with those students. They are not easy. There are often behavioral issues that play a role for them. Clearly, those are not things that I can answer. I can't tell you what to do with a specific student. But what I can do is kind of tell you the areas and the things that I think about to get you started. And the way that I kind of approach those kinds of situations, because I don't think it's something that many people talk about. I don't think it's something that many schools have a lot of people who really know what to do with students who really don't have those skills when they come into your classroom. Tasia says she needs help with a specific student. Okay, well, hopefully this will help. And then at the end, I will take some comments, or excuse me, some questions. So when I'm thinking about these students, sometimes they're what we might consider to be lower functioning. Sometimes they are students who maybe they're not really lower functioning, but the way that they function doesn't show us what they can do. A number of these students I have met over the years surprise me with how quickly they learn once we get past some of these initial learning readiness skills that they really need. Hi, Danielle. Hi, Rosalind. So the first thing that I always do with these students is to do a reinforcement assessment or preference assessment. The first thing we have to figure out is what is motivating to them. And everybody has something that is motivating to them. There are no students for whom there are no reinforcers. We have some reinforcers that are built into us as humans, and then we have some that we acquire over time. Sometimes you have to look really hard for with some of these students to find what you're looking for. So you've really got to do what I call casting a very wide net. Let the student wander the room and see what he does. What is he attracted to? I once had a student that we did this with because everybody said we can't find anything that's reinforcing. And when we let him have just the run of the room, he walked over to the teacher's desk, he got a piece of tape, turned it inside out, and walked around just playing with the sticky piece of it. I then, of course, being me, walked over, took it away from him, and worked on do this. Okay, good. Now you get it back. And we worked on some of that. So the first thing that you've got to really know is what makes this kid tick? What is it that's driving him? It might be, go away from me. For some of our students, it's, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want you to be around me. And sometimes that may be the motivator that we start with. It's not where I want to end up, but it may be where I start. Once you know what some of those reinforcers are, then you want to pair yourself with reinforcement. And I'm seeing more and more of people commenting on this on social media, but I'm not really sure that people really understand what it means. It has multiple purposes as well. When I say pair yourself with reinforcement, what you're trying to do is make yourself reinforcing. And we do that by making ourselves part of that reinforcement process. Because we give him the reinforcer, I become the person with the good stuff. Because I play with the reinforcer, I become the person with the good stuff. I want to engage with him with the reinforcers, the things that are motivating to him, so that eventually I take on some of those reinforcing properties. Because if you think about it, just taking a preschooler as an example, most of our typical kids come into school, preschool or kindergarten, and they have a history of mom fed me, I want to make mom happy. Mom became paired with that unconditioned reinforcer. And then over time, mom became reinforcing. And then when they moved on to school, the teacher kind of took the place of mom in the schoolroom. And she became reinforcing. That desire to make the teacher happy transferred over from that desire to make mom happy. For some of our students, that's not the case. Maybe it's because they have autism. Maybe it's because there's trauma in their background. Maybe it's because there's a real disconnect between mom and the student or the child, or maybe they were removed from the home. There's a whole bunch of reasons as to why that might happen. But because of that, you've got to back up a step and pair yourself with things that are reinforcing. And for those students that you have a hard time figuring out what might be reinforcing, don't limit yourself. I understand that there are times that, we don't want to use food as a reinforcer, but frankly, food is one of our unconditioned reinforcers. So we want to use that to get to other reinforcers. Do I eventually want this student to get to the point where they work for me because they want me to be happy with them? Yes, I do. But that's not where I can start. And if I try to start there and just expect it's going to happen, it's not going to happen, because it's a learning process that this student has to go through. And that may be true whether you're in high school or whether they're in preschool. So I also want to see if I can find some things that might be motivating for a student that require me to make them work. So when I talked about initiating, when I was on last week, I talked about using wind-up toys as communication temptations. I want to use, for young kids, bubbles, wind-up toys. I'll even use them for older kids at times too, because I can put the top on the bubbles. They may not be able to get it off. That becomes an opportunity for me to use it. The bubbles are more valuable because I'm blowing the bubbles, especially for kids that can't do it on their own. Anything I can find as a reinforcer that makes me more valuable is a plus. But again, I got to pick the reinforcers that are where the student's at. Keep in mind that if the student does not improve in his skills, when we use the reinforcers, then what we're using are not reinforcers. And that's a whole other thing. We actually just did a whole workshop on this in the Special Educator Academy about the ins and outs of reinforcement. Because it's not as simple as going, oh, he really likes Cheetos, so I'm going to give him Cheetos. And then 9 weeks from now, you discover he hasn't learned any skills because he liked Cheetos, but they didn't actually improve his correct responding, or we weren't using them effectively. So number one is you've got to find reinforcers, and you've got to use them and pair them with yourself. Another is to pull out during those times, pull out easy tasks that you can reinforce them for doing, or catch the student, obviously, when they're being good or when they're doing what you want them to do. I really like the way you're sitting. Even if, he's sitting because he's eating and he's happy, make sure that you reinforce that. Give him the reinforcer because, again, pairs you with reinforcement, and it pairs the action you want to see with reinforcement. So he begins to get that understanding of that connection. It might be simple tasks like put-in tasks. So it literally might be a cup. And so think about age-appropriate materials. For young kids, I might have stickers. I put a sticker on, you put a sticker on a paper. I put a sticker on a paper, you put a sticker on a paper. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But it might be put-in tasks. So one put-in task might be putting pencils in a pencil holder. Very simple, nothing to it. I can prompt him to do it. I might give him one, I might give him three, depending on what I think he can handle without falling apart. When he puts one in, he gets a reinforcer. When he puts one in, he gets a reinforcer. And eventually he puts all three in and gets a reinforcer. So I'm going to build some, you do what I want you to do, and you get the thing that you want. So that's a real key for helping him understand how that process is going to work. So reinforcement is really got to be the basis of what we're doing, because reinforcement is what teaches skills. That's what makes the skills you want to see increase, which leads to our next section, which is what I call learning readiness skills. Learning readiness skills are where we start teaching the basics of instruction. The basics of instruction are sit down or stay in your seat, do what the teacher tells you, basic imitation, match it. Those are kind of the skills that we can start with that get you ready for instruction. Those are the things that if you don't have those skills, the student is not being contained well enough for us to teach him. So you want to make sure that you've got a solid curriculum-based assessment that you can do, because you're going to want to be able to measure progress on his ability to do these skills. And a good curriculum-based assessment like the STAR, the Strategies for Teaching Based on Autism Research, is going to take you down to those basics. It's going to take you down to those really basic skills, and you're going to be able to show that no, you're not teaching him math because you're teaching him these skills that will allow him to access the math curriculum. But we aren't there yet. We've got to start with where he's at. That's a real key component. So you want to have a good, solid curriculum-based assessment because you want to be able to demonstrate to his family, to your school, this is what we're working on. And there's a basis for it. It's not just something that I'm like coming up with on my own. This is where we start. I like to use the STAR, sometimes the ABLES or the VB map. I just think that they're a little bit more intense in a classroom setting. I think the STAR is a bit more streamlined, but I like them because they take it down to those basic levels and they make sure that the students have these basic skills. Because if he doesn't have the ability to sit and attend and follow a direction and learn from those around him, then he's not going to be able to learn any new material. So if we jump in with math, he's going to be lost. And we're going to spend all of our time chasing him around the room because we didn't teach him how to sit in a chair. So we might start with sitting in a chair. His bottom hits the chair, he gets a reinforcer. His bottom hits the chair, he gets a reinforcer. I say sit down, he gets a reinforcer if he sits down. Over time, if what we're using is a true reinforcer, we should be able to see those skills increase. He should be able to sit for a longer period of time. He should be able to sit when you ask him to sit. He should be able to follow simple one-step directions. These are also skills that you're going to fall back on to mix in with harder skills as he goes on. So they're not lost. They are the basics of learning. Once we get through imitation and some simple directions, we're also going to work on things like matching, probably some language skills like basic receptive ID and expressive ID of items. So there's other skills that we're going to work on through that. So those are kinds of some of the things that you want to think about. Are these sounding like the students that you're in your class? Give me a thumbs up or a like if you are seeing these types of students in your class and these are the kind of kids that you're struggling with. So another thing, the next piece, once we are working on those basic learning readiness skills, those basic little teeny tiny steps, I recognize they're tiny steps, but I will tell you they are huge when we start to see progress, because we go from a student who is not able to attend, who is not able to join a group, to a student who's able to follow directions and begin to learn bigger concepts. So those are really, really key. Our next up, along with that, are basic communication. So if the student is verbal, we might be hearing more communication from him. But if he's nonverbal, we need to really go back and build the foundation. Even for some of our kids that are verbal, especially our kids with autism, may understand less than they express. So if you've ever had that kid who talks a lot, doesn't say anything, and doesn't seem to understand what you're asking him, that's because his expressive language is lower than his receptive language, which is exactly the opposite of the way that it is for most of our other kids and for us. Most of us understand more than we express. Some of our students, it's the opposite, and they fool us into thinking that they're so much smarter than they are. We have good research that shows us that when kids talk, whether what they're saying makes sense or not, people have higher expectations for them than for students who don't talk. And we all know students who don't talk that have a lot of skills that people are missing because they're writing them off because of that. So we've got to start working on some basic communication. So one of the things that we start with might be communication temptations. And you can go back and look at the Facebook Live from last week where I talked about communication temptations, that idea that we're going to work on the student initiating some type of interaction. We need to work on communication, not language. I mean, we also need to work on language, but we're going to focus on getting the student to be able to use their language in a functional way, whether it's a picture, whether it's verbal, whether it's just even a gesture to start, we want the students to understand that they can communicate and deliver a message, and they persist until they get their message met. So, and we also want them to learn to initiate those interactions. So we want to get them engaged with us in communication. So even if they're talking, but they're standing in the corner reciting the news, that's not really communication. It's language, but it's not communication. So we've really got to focus on communication. So those communication temptations. I blow the bubbles, I put the top back on, and I wait. I wind up the wind-up toy, I put it down, it winds down, and I wait. So that expectant waiting, that working on initiation becomes really, really important. Another thing that you can do with these guys, in addition to the put in, is just do some basic turn taking, because that's the beginning of conversation. You know, unless we're in a Facebook Live and I'm talking and you're listening, but you guys are still contributing comments, we're having a back and forth. I'm doing something, you're doing something. I'm doing something, you're doing something. So we might start with your turn, my turn. I put one in, he puts one in. I put one in, he puts one in. If he tries to put another one in, I might have to cover it up until I get my turn, and then it's his turn. I do the same thing. One of the questions I get asked a lot about reinforcement is, what do you do when the kid doesn't give up the reinforcer? And the answer is, we go back to that reinforcement phase, and that's one of the first things we teach. So let's say that a pencil is really reinforcing to him. It's not a really good example, but one of the advantages of food reinforcers is they eat them and they're gone. I cut things up into very small pieces. I had a little guy this week who loved those pumpkins, those like candy corn pumpkins, but oh my gosh, it took him forever to eat it. I'm like, cut it up. And teacher's like, if I cut them up, he won't eat them. Okay, then let's find something else, because we're losing so much instructional time waiting for this kid to eat his pumpkin in little bitty pieces at a time. But food reinforcers are great because they eliminate this problem. But I know that for some of our kids, they're not interested in that. So if he really likes the pencil, he gets the pencil, and then I might hold out my hand and say, your turn. It is amazing how many kids will give you something if you say my turn, not give it to me. I hold up my hand, I say your turn, my turn. If he doesn't do it, then I'm going to wrestle it away from him. I'm going to get it from him, hold on to it for a second, and he gets it back. Literally, I'm going to take it and he gets it back. And then gradually I'm going to increase that so that he begins to know when I say your turn or my turn, he's going to get it back. I'm not keeping it and taking it away forever. And we work on that back and forth as well. That's also the basis of some beginning communication. So your turn, my turn kinds of activities. It might be a put-in task where he puts one in and I put one in. He puts one in and I put one in. It could be stickers on a page. It could be a lot of different things. You could do a file folder together. I put one on the Velcro. I don't care if it's the right one. I use a colored page and colored pieces. So I have a yellow page and yellow pieces, so there are no errors. I put one on, you put one on. I put one on, you put one on. It's a way of inserting yourself into his world. Another thing to look at is to work with your speech pathologist, your augmentative communication specialist, or get an augmentative communication evaluation to look at where should we start for the student to be able to communicate. You do not always have to start with the picture exchange communication system, but it is a cheap and easy way to get started. You may have a student that has a speech generating device or has their own device, or you may have somebody who says, I think this is a good fit for him, and then you work through that. But one of the things you want to do, whether you're using a speech generating device, a voice output device, whether you're using, an iPad, a Dynavox, or just pictures, is you want to recognize that you want to start with basic requests. You want the student to learn to ask for what he wants. You want to give him some power. Asking for something that he wants is the most powerful form of communication. So you really want to make sure that you're starting with that. PECS stands for Picture Exchange Communication System. It does not refer to the pictures. It refers to a specific protocol of 6 phases that are used to teach a student communication, from requesting with one picture that doesn't even have to match the item, all the way up to putting sentences together and making comments and having conversations. So it's designed It's based on the principles of verbal behavior for those behavior analysts in the audience. It's also a verbal behavior program. It just uses pictures. One of the things I like about it is it's extremely tangible. So you may start your student, I've got my notes over my face, you may start your student with one picture because he probably can't discriminate the pictures yet. So his board or his notebook might look like this. And all I want to do is have him take this off, give it to me. I'll have an open hand. I'll take it and I'll give him the bubbles. Here's what I like about the PEX system. I like the fact that if he doesn't get this picture into my hand, it's a tangible understanding that you didn't communicate with me. So I have lots of kids who are verbal and they go stand across the room and they go bubbles, bubbles. But there's no, I'm seeking out the person who has the bubbles. There's no, I'm asking the person who has the bubbles. There's no assurance that they are actually getting their message across. It makes communication tangible. And for our kids that are not communicating effectively, that's often a really good step to go back to. I take verbal kids back sometimes to pictures so that they understand how to make those basic requests. And then they sail through everything else and we move back to verbal. But don't think that you're going to start, these are not the right kinds of visuals, but your book isn't going to look like this when you start. Chances are good your book's going to look like this. And this picture doesn't even have to match the thing that he is doing. That's a later phase. First, we're starting off with just take the picture, give it to me. If I take it, you get bubbles. If you don't get it to me, you're not going to get bubbles because I don't know that that's what you want. Later, we'll work on discriminating, making choices, finding the right picture, all those kinds of things. So this is kind of the basic of you really want to get that communication going. Okay. Sorry, I moved my notes and now I can't find them. So that's where we want to start with communication. Next up, classroom management. So when I think about how I'm going to deliver reinforcers, do I want to deliver reinforcers every single time he does something? Not for the long term, no. You know, in the short term, yes. But over time, I want to be able to space that out. So once he's got some beginning learning readiness skills, I might start building in some token systems or punch cards. I couldn't find my token systems today, but I found my punch cards. And it's, if he follows directions, he gets a punch. If he gets a right answer, he gets a punch. He follows the one-step direction, he gets a punch. And he's working for choice time. In this example, 3 of the holes are already punched. That means he only needs 2 more. I set this up ahead of time. I might start with 4 of them punched. He gets 1, he gets the reinforcer. That's how we start to teach a token system. Is we want to make sure that he gets to the reinforcer quickly. Once he can do it for 1, then we start making it 2. Then we start making it 3. You can use token boards, penny boards, anything that represents it, but it's a good way to start extending some of that reinforcement. Another thing you might do, I'm going to use my same, typically your schedule and your, let me see if I can work on this one. Typically your schedule and your communication devices will be separate, but his schedule might look like this. I might put it on a notebook and the outside just has one visual. The reason I put it on a notebook is so that inside the notebook I put all the visuals in order, and that way I can easily pull out the next one. He might be on a first then, or he might be on a one at a time. I might also take a schedule and put it on a wall. I should have found this picture. And cover up everything except the next activity. And then when he takes that one, I drop it down and we go to the next one. So that he only sees one visual at a time. And then he takes this and matches it. So one of the first things that I might work on matching, once he's got some basic matching, is matching the schedule visuals. Because if you're using check-in boards that have matching visuals, once he knows how to match them, he knows to go to the place that has the matching place of this. So go wash the dishes. Because I know I see this picture over by the sink to wash the dishes. So I might use a schedule with only one visual at a time, not a whole schedule but organize it in some way so that you don't have to find the visual, because these are not kids who deal well with downtime. These are the kids that you want to make sure things are set up before they get to an activity, because otherwise you lose them. And finally, I might also put in an independent work. And an independent work for a student like this might be one task. So it might be 2 pencils in a container. Probably not a ceramic one. But it might be 2 pencils that he has to put in the container. When they go in, he puts it in the finished basket. May not start with the schedule. He has one basket to do, and then he gets the reinforcer. If he has a schedule, it's one visual. What's next is that reinforcer. So that he begins to understand how the system works. When he can independently complete this, I might increase how many things I ask him to do in the same task, or add another task. Just depends on the student and what I want him to be able to do. So my independent work is going to start off very basic. Never feel like you have to start independent work off at 3 baskets. That seems to be, for some reason, we tend to show those pictures the most, but for some of our students, they need just one. Until they're independent, start with 1 basket. They may do it multiple times in their 15-minute independent work center, but they're only going to have to do 1, get the reinforcer. 1 task, get the reinforcer. 1 task, get the reinforcer. So you want to build that kind of thing. And I see that you guys have questions, and I'm going to come back and answer them once I get done. The 5th area that we want to think about is behavior, because most of these students come to us with some level of behavioral issues, and often that's what's getting in the way of their learning. So we have to focus, just like with all behaviors, problem behaviors, we have to focus on teaching them the appropriate behaviors with reinforcement. Think about it. If I don't know how to follow a teacher's direction, I don't follow the teacher's direction, so I'm non-compliant. But really, I'm not so much non-compliant in the way that we think of he refuses to do what the teacher says, as I didn't even understand the direction. So I'm not really non-compliant. I just don't know how to follow directions. So sometimes it's a matter of teaching appropriate skills. Sometimes it's a matter of really delving into figuring out the function of the behavior and then figuring out what skills you need to teach that meet that function. Because these are definitely the kids that come to you that don't have the understanding of how to get that function met in a more appropriate way. They don't know how to call the teacher's attention, so they engage in behaviors because people engage with them. Had a little girl the other day, cracks me up, and you have to try really hard not to laugh at her because her behavior is so attention-seeking. One of the things that she does is she will say, you give her a direction, and she'll say exactly the opposite. So you say, go check your schedule, not check the schedule, not check the schedule. Well, guess what? When you watch the staff then says, no, you have to check your schedule. No, check schedule. No, you have to check schedule. When you hold a visual and you stop talking and you don't get sucked into that interaction and you give her a few minutes to process it, she gets up and goes and checks her schedule because she's not getting any attention for not doing what you want her to do. So you want to make sure for those kids that you are teaching appropriate behaviors, which will then often reduce the problem behaviors. You want to make sure that you know the functions of the problem behaviors that are significant and that you're teaching behaviors that meet those exact same functions. So if he engages in behavior to escape from a situation, we're going to teach him a way to get out of it. That's a whole other topic, but we've got to know the function. I get a lot of questions. What do I do about spitting? What do I do about biting? The answer is always the same. What is the function of the behavior? What it looks like doesn't matter. What it is getting him is what matters. That's what I have to focus on. And finally, just do a lot of catching and being good. He followed a direction, randomly he gets a reinforcer. You find him sitting in his seat quietly, he gets a reinforcer. You're using that reinforcer to really build up those skills and make them second nature, so eventually he doesn't need those reinforcers anymore. So that's kind of where I start. Those are the elements that I kind of put into where I start with this. I'm actually, if you're part of the Special Educator Academy, I'm going to show you guys a tour when we're done here after I answer some questions. We're going to do, I think one of our next workshops is actually going to focus on this. I'm going to break it down the same way I did, but I'm going to give you a lot more detail, and I'll give you some examples. So we'll put that all together because I think that it's a really important topic that I'm seeing a lot of people struggle with. Okay, let me come back to my question. Hold my. All right. Someone says, it sounds like you're talking about one of my favorite students. That's good to know. Hold on just a moment. I want to see if I can get this show up better. And if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the comments. Here we go. I have to get rid of the background. That's the problem. There we go. Okay, so good. So it is the kinds of students that you guys are talking about. Shoot, they're all going to be like this. Sorry about that. Okay, I have a teenage boy who is nonverbal. His reinforcer is a favorite chair. Now I've made it so I can't read it. He's gotten into the habit of only staying in the chair all day, and you've resorted to bringing table work to him. How do we shape back from that? You're going to have to work on very small steps. Stand up, gets a reinforcer, and then he sits down again. Stand up, gets a reinforcer. Stand up, walk 3 steps. Then he gets a reinforcer. Stand up, walk 3 steps. When he can do that pretty independently, stand up and walk to the table. Stand up and walk to the table, start a task. So I would do it in very small steps where you're literally shaping up the skill, shaping that behavior. And then when he's done, he can go back to it. He can go back to his chair because that's his reinforcer. So look for some other reinforcers that might work, but this way you're gradually increasing what you're asking him to do before he gets the reinforcer. I actually had a student we had to do that same thing with. She would ask for a break and get to sit in her, lie on the sofa and listen to whatever music she wanted. Food is a huge reinforcer, but family has indicated not to. He survived on gummy bears. And I think that's where we want to really emphasize the short term. If you can find things that are not food, it's great. Cast a very wide net to other kinds of sensory activities that the student might find reinforcing and see if you can use something else. If you can't, then somebody had mentioned earlier, cutting up Skittles, cutting up gummy bears with a pill cutter. I use a big tackle box or a craft kit that have all those little boxes in them, and I cut them up in little pieces. And then you only are giving very small amounts for each reinforcer. I can cut a gummy bear up into about 6 pieces. So we get 6 reinforcers for every gummy bear. I can probably cut it up into more if I really try, but sometimes I have to keep it powerful enough or it loses its value, which is the problem we ran into with the pumpkins this week. And if you cut them up ahead of time, you've got them all ready to go. So you're not delaying the reinforcer by having to break it apart. I can vouch for independent work. It's like a miracle for my 2 students. We've not done any of the other things you've talked about. We also don't have an assessment. I'm getting ideas about where to go with them next. You can get an assessment like a STAR or a VB-MAP or an ABLES or even a Brigance. If you've got a Brigance in your system, use the Brigance. Just recognize you're going to have to translate items in the Brigance into the skills you want. You don't care if he can build a 3-block tower. You care about whether or not he can imitate you building a 3-block tower, whether he's got the fine motor skills to use the 3 blocks to put them in. That's what you're trying to get at with that assessment item. That's the problem I run into sometimes with developmental assessments, is that the test items and the skill you want aren't always identical. But independent work is great, and that's huge. But make sure that you also are teaching those basic building blocks because you want him to be able to expand beyond that and learn new material. STAR stands for Strategies for Teaching Based on Autism Research, And if you actually do a search for, I think it's Star Autism Support, but even if you just write Star Autism, you will find them. It's put out by ProEd. It's got 3 levels. It's designed for kindergarten or preschool through primary grades. There's also the links, which is an extension of that. One of the things you have to recognize is that all of these are really designed for younger students. So you want to make a shift to a more functional curriculum for your older students, but you're still going to want some of those basic learning readiness kinds of skills. But you don't want to say when he maxes out the star, when he maxes out the star, he's going to be a really good 8-year-old. My goal in a 20-year-old is not for him to be a really good 8-year-old. So you want to think about that. Judy says, strategies for teaching based on autism research. Thank you. How do you know that the students will understand why they're getting a reinforcer? They don't have to understand why. That's actually, I think, one of the things, it's one of the beauties of it, and it's one of the things that we get confused. Here's the way reinforcement is defined. Anytime that a reinforcer follows a behavior and over time the behavior increases, then you have a reinforcer. If the behavior does not increase, it's not a reinforcer. So they don't have to cognitively understand that they're getting this because they did this. If you consistently follow, he sat in his seat when I told him, he gets a reinforcer. I told him to sit in his seat, he got a reinforcer when he did it. I said sit down, he got a reinforcer once he sat down. If you do that consistently enough, he will automatically begin to do it. It's an inherent process in all of us. We all learn this way. We all have unconscious behaviors that we develop over time because we avoid things we don't like or we get things that we like, whether we understand them or not. So they don't have to understand it. I do try to say, good sitting down, so that they hear that and they might or might not make that connection. But the idea is that you want to make sure that you're consistently reinforcing immediately, as fast as possible, after the behavior that you want to increase. Sometimes it's so difficult to figure out the function of the behavior, though. It is, definitely. A kid who acts out just because he's being a stinky head. He's not acting out just because he's being a stinky head. He's acting out because it's getting him something. And it may be attention, or it may be that other kids are. Like, I've got kids who engage in dissing each other because it makes them fit in with their peer group. So you've got to go beyond just attention escape. You've got to look at the more nuanced, this is how I get people to interact with me. I have a lot of kids that engage in behaviors that look like they're being a stinky head when really what they're doing is getting people engaged with them. So you've got to really be an undercover detective, and I could go on and on about that one. If a student has minimal reinforcers and the reinforcers are not stronger than his grabbing or pinching. So here's the function is escape or attention. Those are the reinforcers you should use. So look at what kind of things he wants to escape from. Look at what kinds of attention are reinforcing the behavior. Then take those and use them as reinforcers. So what are some appropriate ways that you can give him attention that gets a big reaction? Because chances are grabbing and pinching gets a big effect, and sitting in your chair gets a hey, thumbs up to you. And that's a whole lot different than ah! So you got to find a way to really go ah with positive things, and make his positive behavior get that level of attention. So if you know what the reinforce, or it may be I take stuff away. He doesn't have to do the things. You can take things away and have the behavior increase, and it's called negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is not punishment. It's actually when you remove something. I put my seatbelt on and then annoying buzzing goes away. It's sometimes, it's not the only reason I wear my seatbelt, but for many people it is. I yell at my dog and she stops barking, and so I might yell more often. That actually doesn't work. But so you want to look at, maybe it's when he does something you want him to do, he gets a break. Maybe that's what he's working for. Maybe he gets it immediately so that he makes that connection. Right. And you can also give very specific praise when you're trying to increase a behavior and let the student know. But just recognize that even if they don't understand that language, if it consistently follows that behavior and that behavior is going to increase if what you're using is truly a reinforcer. I have a student who's almost completely blind and can mimic some word sounds with rote counting, spelling, etc. I don't know how to help him be able to communicate since he can't see the picture. I would look at objects. And if you do a search for Perkins, there's actually some research using the PEC system with an object system. And if you do a search for Perkins and blind, you will find their site. I have a bunch of pins to them. And if you can't find them, tag me on Facebook and I'll be happy to see if I can find one for you. They've got a lot of really good suggestions about how to make those adaptations to those exact same kinds of things. You might need an object schedule. We have used a tactile independent work system, and we have used PECs. There's actually some research looking at using objects as picture exchange so that they can feel them. And actually the girl that I worked on where she would get up off the couch and then get her break again, she was blind. And so she had an object schedule. We also had a language master or a card reader that she would put a card through that had the object on it. And in the teacher's voice of whatever class she was going to, she would hear them say, "It's time for art," from the art teacher's voice and things like that. Sorry, I left the door open, and so she's barking at the neighbors. Do the same strategies apply to unwanted behaviors? I'm not quite sure what you mean. You're only going to use a reinforcer to increase the behavior you want to increase more. However, reinforcement is also what is increasing the negative behaviors. So keep that in mind. Excuse me just a moment. Lucy! See, temporarily she stops, and that's why my yelling increases. She doesn't stop in the long term, so it probably shouldn't work, but it does. It's why parents yell at their children, is for momentarily they stop. Inconsistently they stop, and we get reinforced inconsistently. Do these same strategies apply to unwanted behaviors? Yes, reinforcement will also increase unwanted behaviors. I don't know if that's the intent of the question or not. How do you know a student is ready for a token system? I would look at whether... Lucy! Excuse me. Lucy! Okay, go outside and bark. No, she's going to stand in the bedroom and bark. How do you know a student is ready for a token system? Start with reinforcing every single time. When you get to a point where you're seeing the behaviors increase pretty consistently, then you can start using the token system kind of the way I started. But I would not necessarily start at that level for these kids. I would start with just direct reinforcement for the behaviors. Okay, I think those are all our questions. For the moment anyway. If you have more questions or you're watching the recording, just tag me in the comments and I'm more than happy to answer them. Again, everything I've said is a lot more complex than this. I do want to take a moment, if you'll stay with me for just a few minutes. I want to show you, I know many of the people in this group have asked, I have an angry face and I'm not sure why I have an angry face. If anybody has an angry face, let me know. Hold on a second. I've got another question. When we were at the teach training, they mentioned object schedules. So I would start with an object schedule, but you're going to have to teach him how to use it. So just recognize it's not going to solve all your problems because he's not going to understand it until you teach it to him. So I want to show you, I'm going to share my screen. Many of you have said when you were invited to or came into the group that you were interested in knowing more about the Academy. And I love the Academy, and this weekend is our 1-year anniversary. We started at this time last year, and I'm very excited about it, and I'm excited about how it's grown. And it's occurred to me that the video I have on the sales page is really behind everything that we have. The dog barking, I'm sorry, I can't make her stop, unfortunately. Okay, so I want to share my screen. Those are my notes. So I want to show you what the Academy is. When you come into the Academy, you see the dashboard, and the dashboard, excuse me, I'll show this to you. Hopefully the door will prevent it a little bit. Sorry, I should have closed the front door so she couldn't do that. So this is the Academy, and when you come in, when you join, you see the dashboard, which has the links to kind of all the different parts of it. We have a community, we have full-length courses, we have 1-hour workshops, we have quick wins, we have live chats twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month, and we have some resources that typically support the reinforcers. Thank you. So I just want to show you some of the things that have grown. When we started with just setting up classrooms as our courses. We now have a course on setting up classrooms, which is 8 hours long, behavioral problem solving, which I think classrooms is 6 hours, behavioral problem solving is 8 hours, taming the data monster is 6 or 7 hours, and then social skills I know is 6 hours. But they are all set up so that you can do each part of them in very small components. So you can do each one of the elements. So let's say you just want to learn about schedules. You don't have to do the whole course. Each one of these this is a 6-minute video. This is a 21-minute video, which is one of our longer ones. Most of them are under 20 minutes. So you can do them in pieces. You don't have to do them all at one time. You can, but you don't have to. So if you want to know more about how to deal with problems and figure out the function, the behavioral problem solving course takes you all the way through what an FBA is, ways of gathering information, developing hypothesis statements, how you analyze the data from your FBA, how you design a behavior plan as a team that will work within a classroom, and how to implement and monitor that plan. And so it takes you through that in 15 to 20 minute segments. And same thing with data, and same thing with teaching social skills. Our next our next course, which will be out at the beginning of January, will be on communication skills and teaching communication. If we go to our workshops, we've got 25 workshops now. I have 3 free workshops that if you want to get a taste of what they're like, one is on data systems, one is on independent work systems, and one is on challenging behavior and preventing it. But we had a lot of people using the unique learning system that we kind of did this is what you can do with it, training for paraprofessionals, writing IUP goals, increasing and maintaining engagement in whole groups, content standards, facilitating communication. So we've got 26 different workshops at the moment, and we add at least 2 a month. We've got a number of quick wins, which I'm trying to increase. We're actually going to have one in the next week or so on using token systems and token economies. And so we've got just simple tricks of laminating folders in a personal laminator. And I'm going to post probably tomorrow post from the blog that actually I took one of the quick wins and added it to it for the Excel graphing tool. I recently updated it for the new year. So these in the workshops often have print resources that go along with them. I did the data collection forms that I have in my TPT store. I created those while I was doing the data collection course, so they are actually part of the handout of the data collection course, and members get them for free. The resources, I'm still really working on how to best arrange them, because there are not a lot of TPT print resources here. Most of my T stuff is on TPT, but my manuals for classroom setup and my data collection systems forms all fit really well with the courses, so I felt they were something that the community really could use. Next up, we have live workshops in the evening. They're usually an hour long. twice a month. And we have a live question and answer every quarter, so every 3 months. And then we have a really thriving community. We have study groups where we'll be starting one in the near future on the social skills course, where you can actually win prizes for completing different tasks and going through the whole course. We did one for setting up classrooms. We did one for taming the data monster. We've got resources that members have shared, places to ask questions, all that kind of stuff. So we have all different ways to communicate. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it is. There's a communication system with me, with each other. There's a really nice community. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has about it. And I see that we've got a couple questions. So let me just... Somebody says that Special Educator Academy is the best place to be. I really have enjoyed it. It's been so much fun. That was Laura. Good. I'm glad that this made you feel a little bit more prepared for your student. The Academy has been so helpful for me, so very glad I have it. And I'm a member. I'm so glad you are part of it as well. I don't know that I could have made this change without it. Awesome. You guys are really awesome. Do you get a certificate when you complete a course that can be used for CEUs? I can't guarantee that your district will accept it, but when you complete a workshop or a course, you get a certificate that has the objectives, my credentials, the title. So it's got all the information that I give to districts when I do professional development for them that you can take to your district and request CEUs for. I just can't guarantee that they will give it to you, but we do have quite a few members whose districts actually pay for their membership. So I know that they're able to use it that way. Nothing pie in the sky about the Academy. Everything we're taught is practical and immediately implementable. Yes, it is a word. And that's really what I strive to do. I come from a background of working primarily in classrooms as either an administrator or a consultant, and my focus is on what can you use. My focus is also on making that bridge between the pie in the sky research and what you have to actually implement in your classroom. I have a friend, age 4, who's nonverbal. He's on autopilot all the time. He doesn't respond to his name. I did get him to sit for a reinforcer with a visual. You've been working on putting dominoes in a jar, hand over hand with reinforcers each time. He's completely not engaged. He just reaches for it the whole time. So a lot of what you're talking about, you want to continue that, hoping that he catches on. Make sure you're only giving the reinforcer when he is engaging in the target behavior that you want. And make sure that, eventually, every time you have to physically prompt him, don't reinforce him. If you can give him less of a prompt, reinforce him for that. So you've got to make sure that you're reinforcing progressively more independence, because if every time you do hand over hand, he gets a reinforcer, there's no point. You also want to make sure that your reinforcer is really strong and motivating for him, because if his behavior isn't increasing, it isn't a reinforcer. So you may also have to mix them up. All right. I think those are all of our questions. If you have any questions about what we talked about tonight or about the Academy, just tag me in the group and I'll be happy to answer. I apologize for Lucy. She likes to participate sometimes, and I know it makes it hard to hear. If you want to join, I will put the link in the description above this, but if you just go to specialeducatoracademy.com, you'll go to the login page and there's a link that says not a member, want to join us. If you click that, it takes you to the sales page as well. So I hope that you'll think about it. If you have questions, we have quite a few members in the group. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer them. I, of course, love it, but I created it, so it's good to hear from the people that are part of it. All right, guys, everybody enjoy the rest of your Sunday night, and I will see you next week.